as normal if you want. Anyway, so this is the Astrantia. I actually really love this in real life. It's quite a delicate flower and it's got interesting leaves that come with it as well. But I don't know, I haven't got any in my garden. I feel like I need to go and get some. And then the cow parsley, this is my take on the cow parsley, because cow parsley can be quite lots of little blossoms that kind of form little round mass flowers. So this is my take on the cow parsley, but they're both, this one's a really nice filler flower, this is a really nice medium flower. Obviously this number of stamens here, it costs a lot more to make something like this than it does the cow parsley. But we're going to start by making the center for the Astrantia. Now if I just share a picture, I've actually called up the website for Astrantia just to give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. So you can see what we're trying to achieve, the stamens in the middle here, and then the double layer of petals. It comes in various colors. So I would suggest that you perhaps use white paste to start with, and then we can edge it with a little bit of pink, or if you want to go a bit darker, you can. So like most of the flowers, you want to start off with the base color. So if there is some white in there, so there's some pale pink in on the base of each of these petals or bracts. So that even though you might want this kind of hot pink shading, you would need to start off with a really pale pink base. Nice white ones. We've got some that are just white edge with pink, white edge just with green. This is standard. I quite like the look of it. And you can see that the actual centerpiece looks like a pin cushion or a dome profile to it. And that's what we're trying to achieve with the stamens. Now you can achieve it with cotton, but it is better to have the seed head stamens to do the job much quicker and easier, but I can show both processes. So it's quite straightforward. We're going to start off with some Nile green tape and probably a 26 gauge wire. You could use a 24 gauge wire if you prefer. It's the only wire that's going to be on as the stem. So if you have a 24 or a 26, that's going to give you the strength that you need. And then the stamens I'm going to use are these seed head stamens here. If you've got something smaller than that, that's fine. You can actually increase the size of these stamens just by wetting the end and dipping them into your CMC powder. And you could make your own, and I'll demonstrate that as well. But of course, sitting there and making the equivalent of about 40 stamen heads is going to take quite a while. So, you know, the quick fix is to buy. So I'm just going to unravel my stamen bundle and take, and we'll count these. I'm just going to, they're quite multi, there's a lot of them. And when you fold them in half, they double up. So you want to make sure that you've got enough to give yourself a decent center to your flower. And you're going to ask me how many here. 3, 6, 9, 15, 8, 9, probably about 25 or 26 single head. And then, of course, when you fold them over, that doubles up in number. So you probably end up with just over 50 heads. So 25. If you're making a smaller one, more closed up flower, you could use less. But they are one of the more expensive flowers to make because of the number of stamens. So I'm just trying to level all of them off. It's probably a good idea at this point as well to take some tape, get that nice and stretched, ready. And then we'll take our wire. I'm actually going to change my mind. I've got a 24 there, but I'm going to change my mind. I am going to go to a 26. And the reason for that is because I'm going to need to fold this in half, and it then becomes quite difficult to twist if it's a 24. And if you think about it, if we're twisting it in half, then you've got double the strength anyway. So don't worry about the stem thickness. So folding, I've just tried, it's very difficult to keep them all together as well. Bring them the other half over and level again. Try and keep it so you've got them all looped. And take your 26 gauge wire, threadle it through to halfway, and then close that up. Pinch really, really firmly at the base and then twist tight. Just try and make sure they all stay level. You've got an opportunity, every opportunity you've got really. They can be raised in the center and the ones on the side can be down a little bit, but just try and keep them all together. You don't just want one single one really sticking its head out. So we'll just cross that and make it twist tight. Whatever you do, don't let go of the stamens because they will fly. You probably only need to do maybe 4 or 5 twists right up by the fold. And now gathering those together, we've got to, as neatly and as tightly as we can, tape together right at the bottom because we need the length. So I'm just going to take probably, this is a half width tape. So we've got 6mm, probably just a bit more than 6mm being used up at the bottom. And the rest of the stamens are going to be showing out the top of the flower. Now, try and press tightly when you do this, because the neater you can make this part, the better it's going to look when you thread it through your flower. Okay, it's quite a challenge to get, because you've got to get a big hole in the petals to get this through. So the neater you are at this point, the better it's going to be for you. Okay, straighten off the wires where they're not twisted, and just, you may as well tape all the way down. So one of these stamens per flower. If you're doing the garland, I've actually made 3. I'm looking at this as well, and I feel the need to actually tape it up just a little bit more. So I'm going to come above just by another 6mm. The thickness of the tape is 6mm. Just want to lose some of that length. I'll give you a size in a moment to really pinch that tight. Try and keep your taping really neat so you haven't got really thick taping. And the stamens are about 2 centimeters in length once you're finished. The petals themselves are going to sit about here. So I'll just, having taped a bit more there, I shall just use up that tail end. Hold on tight here, and then you can start to open up your stamens. Now, these have actually got a little bit of lime green, moss green and lemon yellow mixed together on the stems, but not on the heads. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my lime shade and colour that now. You can work your way into the stems quite nicely, but leave the heads uncoloured for the moment. When you start to follow the pictures online, you could of the real flowers, you'll see if you need to catch any colour on them. But at this stage, we'll leave it just with the green. So that's a colour we can't put on once we've put in the petals on. Now I just open those up a bit more. And if you want to make your flower fuller, then you can add more stamens. Try and avoid the stamens bending sharply. The stems themselves need to look quite straight. You can use your tweezers to pull these out as well. Okay, Now, if you're working with cotton, it's not as effective, but you can do it. So I'll show you in case that's something that you're doing. I've just got a glass. I can put this, it's my candle, but if I put that in there, it should stop the cotton from rolling off onto the floor. And a bit like we've done before, if you use 2 fingers, just part them a little bit, and then you just want to wrap this round. Now you need lots. You'll need lots. I would say more than 50. So it's got to look like a thick bundle, a thick loop on your finger before you stop. 50 is probably not going to do it. You might need to go round 100. So then you've got like 200 fronds, because you need the volume to be able to open, otherwise it's going to look a bit sorry for itself. You could perhaps use cotton for the small ones, the small flowers, the more closed up ones. The best one is, the best flowers to make are the fully open ones. So I've got quite a lot on there. I can see what that's going to do. You can see the quantity on there. And the reason for parting the fingers is so that you can actually get the loop off your fingers. I'm still going to stick to 26. So this is an alternative way of making the stamens. So we're just going to give that a figure of 8 twist and then fold over, and you can see that's a super thick bundle. You could, if you're worried about the length of this, you could actually part your fingers more so that the strands, the length of the full strand is longer. So twist it to create the figure of 8, put 1 loop over the other, and then thread that all the way through to the center. Hold on to your cotton while you twist. I like to go in here then, because I can just use the blade of my scissors to help me make sure that all those cotton fronds are straightened. And then I'm going to stretch the tape. And in the same way as before, I'm going to tape just down the bottom. I don't need to go as far up because the length here is narrower. But we need to incorporate at least ½ centimetre of that cotton, so that when we cut it, it doesn't open up. Tape all the way down. If I come back up here with my fingers now and press tight, and now I need to hold on to that firmly while I put the blade of my scissors through and cut to separate all those loops. Just run the blade through just to make sure you've got them all. And once you've done one, you'll know whether you need to put that many in. Now we've got some loose ones here as well, which I could probably do with trimming off. So I'm just drawing everything straight, and then if you place your thumb just at the top here and give it a little bit of a trim. And open that out. But to me, it's a little bit on the fine side when you look at the actual piece, the actual flowers. This is a bit fluffy. And here again, we would need to colour with the lime green. if you can, try and go in and get some of that green shading within the strands, but avoiding the very top if you can. You could probably make like dandelions or something using this technique, and things like old man's beard, the clematis old man's beard. Definitely thistles. Now, it's not tried and tested here, but if you wet areas, I'm going to use my glue. Don't do this for a minute because I'm not sure this is going to be the best option. But if we take our sugar glue and strategically dampen tips, random areas around the tops, you only have one dunk with this. You don't really want to get your CMC that wet either. I'm just going to level out the CMC in the bottom of the pot, and then just touch the tips in the hope that that will pick up some of the CMC. And we have got something now that is slightly thicker on the top. Try, I don't know how much I've put on this side, but it looks a bit unbalanced. Okay, if we go back to the stamens of the actual flower, you can see what we're trying to achieve. The stamens are much just like single stemmed. The other option is, which I will also just quickly show you, it's very time consuming because you will be doing one by one, but it would work. It's a good technique for the cow parsley as well. And that is if we take 33 gauge wires, and you could cut these in half, because they're stamens, you don't need them super long. You could even, this is already in a third length, but you could actually cut them into sixes, but they're then difficult to handle. But if I've shown on other classes that you can dunk in water and pick up some CMC on the tip end. So it's just the tip end that's going in the water, and you can make your own stamens like that. So all I've done, then I'd put this upright in a piece of Oasis, and that can set to dry, but you would need to make probably 50 of them. So it's definitely a sit in front of the telly job. So into the water first, then into the CMC, back into the water, back into the CMC, and that will give you something that is probably very similar to the seed head, the real one that you buy. Okay, so you could do it like that, and then you would have to gather all those together and you're ready to tape. So that is something you could certainly do, and we can use that for the cow parsley as well, which has got seed head stamens dotted around ones that are petals. Okay. We're going to make two shapes and put one on top of the other. So one's actually made with a Mexican hat and the other one is a flat piece that's put on top. So it's actually very similar to the process when you make a freesia or a fuchsia or an all-in-one daffodil. So it's a process that's quite interesting to do. So I would recommend here that perhaps just watch this, because by the time I finish showing you how to do it, yours will have dried out. Okay, So I'm going to start with a small ball of paste. It's about 1 centimetre in diameter. The rest of my paste is on standby in a pot, just so that, or in a packet, just so that it doesn't dry out. You've got some options. These are the small ones for the cow parsley as an option. This is the one I've described and suggested that you try and get, but I know that they've been difficult to get hold of. If you've got both sets, the large and the small, the N4 from the large set. So there's 4 in one set that go big, and then you've got 4 in the small set, of which the smallest one is the N8, the largest one is the N5. So you can use the N5, so N5 or N4. If you haven't been able to source, but you know in your little box you've got these are by Gem, Jem, Gem Cutters, and they will do as well, so 6 petals. But they're not as well shaped as these ones. So I'm going to take my shape and take my paste and roll it into a crack-free, smooth, nicely warmed up ball, and then just take a little bit. We just need a back to handle, just a little pimple at the back there, and then once you've got your little pimple, then press out to form the rim of the Mexican hat. We want this quite thin, so it's a delicate petal. You do need to be careful how you store these once you've made them, because when they clunk into each other, they can break, as each petal has not got a wire in it. It's just all unwired, other than the central wire where the stamen is. So I'm just going to take a little bit of corn flour, because that feels a bit sticky, put that onto my surface, drop my shape down on there, excuse me, and then with your cocktail stick, or if you've got a paintbrush that's got a nice kind of rounded, smooth side stem, you can start to roll out. Now, if you bring your tool right into the pimple and then roll out, then you're going to get a thin area around here and nice and thin elsewhere. A little bit of corn flour if you feel it's going to stick to the tool. You might have a cell pick or like a tiny little rolling pin that you could use, but a cocktail stick or a paintbrush will be absolutely fine. So it's nice and thin. I'm just going to go in here with my fingers just to thin it a little bit so there isn't a thick ridge around the pimple. Now we can line up the cutter. So drop the whole center over the pimple, press down nice and firm, give it a good old rub, pull the excess from around, and this bit we can reuse there, and then just rub your finger against the edge of the cutter to give it a crisp cut. Now, just find something, maybe the small end of your bone modeling tool, to just poke the center, and that should help it come out. And now you've got your shape. Going back to the fine paintbrush or your cocktail stick, we're just going to put a bit of corn flour on the tool and then push into the center just to hollow out the middle just a little bit. It's getting it ready for inserting the stamens once we've put the second layer on. And at this point, we need to do some trimming. So we're going to take our fine scissors, and each petal is divided exactly in half to make it multi-petaled. Okay, so we just work our way around. Now, this process that I'm doing now, we're going to roll out a second piece of paste in a moment, and that we are going to treat in the same way. We're going to snip the petals so we get two. So that's your first prepared shape, and this I need to go undercover with. So I've just got a little plastic bag on the side, and I'm just going to gently put it in there, close the upper fraction while I do my next petal. Thinking about it, if you've got a piece of plastic, you might want to do the flat one first, and then that can go under your piece of plastic, maybe like a document wallet, just a clear plastic document wallet. So here I'm going back to my 1 centimetre ball of paste again, and another 1 centimetre ball of paste, and rolling out a nice thin shape without the Mexican hat. My paste is a little bit sticky, so I need to again add the corn flour. Just try and work with only the amount of paste that you need, and that way if you are adding corn flour like I am today, then it means that you're not upsetting the recipe, the sugar flour paste. You're not incorporating too much dryness in there. And if we go back to exactly the same cutter again, drop that down onto the shape. Yeah, so in hindsight, I would suggest you make this one first because it's easier to keep it dry, because it just needs to go in a flat bit of plastic. So excess into your bag or pot, and then rubbing the edges of the cutter to get a crisp cut. Release the shape and drop it onto your board. Now this needs to be treated in the same way, so we are going to give each petal a little cut. Try and stay in the middle. It's actually not as easy as you think. You might prefer to rest this on your foam pad because then you've got something that you can kind of push down onto with the scissors, a bit of flexibility rather than scratching your board. So that's our prepared petal. I'm just going to put this onto my foam pad because there's one more process that we need to do for both shapes, and that is with the cocktail stick, the pointy end. You could, if you want, I didn't put it on the kit list, but if you've got the sharp end of the veining tool, the Dresden veining tool, that will work as well. But again, you need corn flour on there. All I want to do is just put a central vein line down each petal. We're not going to thin this with the bone modeling tool because we don't want to lose this shape, this point. So we just run the tool through the center of each petal. Okay, and then do the same with the other shape. And if you have got a foam pad that's got a little hole in it, you'll be able to put your little pimple in there. That might make life a little bit easier for you. And just showing you the alternative, which is the cocktail stick. If you just take the whole thing, hold it fairly parallel, so fairly horizontal, and just draw in. So I'm not really pointed, I'm quite flat on the surface and just dragging a little bit. It might extend the petals, but that is absolutely fine because they've got this telltale little vein line through the center. It's actually really difficult to position and get that right in the middle. You could definitely make daisies like this. You would make your center, you'd need to make your center differently, but you could definitely make little daisies like this. So now this one, which has got the indent and the pimple, I'm just going to take a little bit of my glue, go into that indentation, just come across just maybe 2 or 3 mil onto those petals. Pick up your other shape that you prepared, the flat one without the pimple, and then line this up so it's directly over the top, but try and do it so that the petals are in betweeny so you can see them. Now this has got to come out of here, so I'm just going to tip that upside down. Don't need my foam pad anymore. And with paintbrush, bit of corn flour, and now we're going to go back into the center. Watch out it doesn't move when you do this because it's still a bit loose. Just go back and push the top petal set into the bottom petal set. Now at this point, we're ready to put our stamen in. Make sure the wire is nice and straight. Locate the center of the indentation that you've made in the flower you've prepared, and then try and do it so that the wire comes through the center at the back. As you hit the tape, you'll get a bit of resistance, so you need to twist the wire to help it drill through. Now, when you come to this really fat part, you're going to have to be very, very careful. You need to slowly start to twist and drill this thickness through the center. If you work too hard or there's too much glue on that middle, then you could find that it will break apart, and then you will need to start again. So just try not to put too much glue when you put your two petals together. My glue to help this hold is going to be at the top edge of that tape, very small amount. Then very lightly holding my fingers here, I am slowly drilling. So don't just pull it, you need to kind of twist it so that hole starts to expand. Pushing on once you're there. So now I can't see my, I feel like I want that to go up a bit higher actually. So probably to about there. So when I'm looking at the stamens, they've actually ended up probably being just over 1 centimetre tall in the centre and maybe 1 centimetre tall here. So pressing the back now to neaten, and they haven't got much of a back. So what I'm going to do is you can either use your knife, a cutting wheel, just start to take, you can use your fingernail, a little bit of that excess paste. We don't want to lose it all. We can colour it green and it'll look part of the stem. Now in real life, they're not chunky at the back, but there's nothing you can do to avoid that. And now I can just gently just make a loop with your finger and gently close those up. And that is your flower. So the cow parsley we've got, I mean, I made a big bundle. I've actually got 3 bundles here. And you can make them using just the stem of the stamens. But if you've got really, sometimes when you buy the stamens, it's almost like a piece of cotton in the center, which doesn't allow you to hold upright, in which case you might want to make your own out of 33 gauge wire, which I've shown you already, so where you dip the tip into the water, into the CMC, water CMC. So you could make your own, but each blossom will need a stamen, and we need to cut one of the ends off. If we fold it, they're not long enough. Okay, so we do need to take one of the bobble ends off. Now for me, that's sacrilege, because the cost of them, it's, you know, it's ridiculous that we have to trim that. If you take a little bit more off, then you can save the small ones. So if I were to cut this just a little bit further down, I'd still have a length, but I've got something potentially that I can push into a primrose, or so you can save them and use them for the centers as something where you can just simply put them in with a pair of tweezers. Okay, so that length would be okay, and the length of this stem is about 4 centimeters, between 4 and 5 centimeters depending on what you're doing, and we're going to be taping them quite low down. So the longer the stem, the less fiddly they are to do. And then using either the N5, or I've actually got a cheat here. This is from Sugar City. I don't even think you can get this anymore, but it's just a tiny, tiny little K-Lex cutter. You could use something like that instead if you wanted to. You could even make these sort of by hand, and I will show you how, just so you can see what you can do if you haven't got a cutter. And if you want, you can roll out larger pieces of paste and cut lots of these shapes, pop them under plastic, or get them stuck onto stamens quite quickly, and then they won't dry out. So nice and thin, a little bit of corn flour on my board. corn flour on the cutter as well because it's so fine, and then we'll press down, pull the excess around, try and keep the flat piece because you can get a few more out of there. So I've only used a very small amount of paste, only not even a centimetre. Give it a good rub while it's in the cutter, and then the challenge is going to be find something like the back of a paintbrush to actually push that through. Now inside there the hole is much smaller, it's really, really tiny, so I'm maybe going to need a cocktail stick. I can just push that through, that will just release it enough. It's poked through a hole, but that's okay. And then we can just pull off that petal. You can see it's absolutely tiny, although it's by pushing it through from the back, it's given me a nice kind of closed up shape already, which is really handy. And then we're going to take the individual stamen, pierce the center of the flower that you've just cut, feed it almost all the way up to the stamen bubble head. And now you need some glue, but not much. You need to wet the head just a fraction and pull the stamen into the center of the flower and give it a little squish. Just maybe corn flour on your fingers if you think it's going to stick. Uh-oh. This is where I've actually got glue on my fingers, so it's pulled it off. Now, I've now only got 2 petals on there, and that's okay because I can still keep and use this one. So I'm just going to leave that to one side, cut another one, see if I can show you. I might also take a little bit of glue onto a second cut stamen. Really don't use much because it's a problem in itself. And then if I take the petals that have dropped off, I've got 4 on here or 5 on here. Hook or crook, we might be able to get those stuck on as well, possibly. Make sure your fingers are not gluey when you do this. So they may hold, they may flick off, I don't know. But you can use petals if they've broken. But let me try and show you a proper one. Stupid fragile. Try with the cocktail stick. I'm thinking if I can find something that's got more of a flatter end. So if I take a little bit of on that cocktail stick, it's not going to be so severe with the press down. It's such a tiny hole. Okay, so that's released the shape from the cutter. Remember, corn flour is going to do that for you. Take your stamen bobble, cut one off, leaving a little bit of stem. If you want to keep that, you can store those in a little bag or pot. Take hold of the end of the stamen where you've cut the bobble off from, pierce the center of your flower, true to form like a pancake. The first one didn't work, but this one I think is going to be fine. Make sure these are rolled thin because they still come out quite thick. A little bit of glue. The glue is actually concentrated more at the bottom, the base of the stamen. And as you come up, just close up. So you're trying to scrunch onto the bobble rather than push on. And that is your tiny, tiny little blossom. You could make a more realistic baby's breath, or goodness me, can't remember the name of it. Karen mentioned it earlier. Oh, what's it called? Gypsophilia. That's it. So you can make more realistic gypsophilia with this, and you rather than the blossom cutter, and you can double up your petals, so you could cut 2 shapes and feed one up behind. But for this, that's all we want. That is it. It is a production of many, many of these petals. Now, when I'm counting through what I have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it's about 18 of these, or if you've lost some petals, that's fine. So 18 in total. And then when we put them together, we're going to add in probably about 10 of the stamens without any petals on. So if you can't get on with the cutter, or you haven't got one of these cutters, then you could use just a tiny ball of paste. So this is about, when I'm measuring, this is probably only about 2 or 3 millimeter. I've got a 33 gauge wire that I've cut into 6 pieces, 6 equal pieces, and we can put a little hook in the end. Just tighten the hook up. That's just going to give it a good point to anchor to. Push. You could add a bit of glue to this, but I'm debating whether you really don't want that much, because then it's going to transfer into what you're going to do next. But if the paste is wet enough, you probably don't need that. So sit the ball on top of the hooked end and then press the paste over so that you get something that looks like a matchstick head or a cotton wool bud. And that gives you a nice rounded top, which we can then go ahead and start to snip petals out of. If you want to, you can make that more ball-like, just kind of flatten it a little bit, and that'll give you more surface area to cut into. So when you're chopping, just avoid the area where the wire is, because you don't want to cut through. So I'm just going to take my scissors. I'm going to balance the scissors on one of my fingers and start by snipping around the outside. If it falls off, you can just screw the paste up and start again. If you can get more than 3 cuts on it, then that's a bonus. Oh, this one we might get 5 on, but it's feeling a bit wobbly on the wire now as well, so I need to be careful. I'm just going to pinch that a little bit so it secures to the wire. Once you've opened the petals up, you can just pinch them a little bit with your fingers, and that'll make them broaden and thin. There's one big fat one there. I could probably just about get another petal in there. And if you've got squared off edges, you can use your fingers or a cocktail stick just to touch the ends so that they round off a little bit. And then you squidge it to close. So that one's a little bit bigger than the other one I did. So now I've got roughly 18 of my little blossoms. I'm also going to hook out perhaps 8 or 10 of the seed head stamens. These will all need one end cutting off, like I've shown you. So just snip through there. It's actually easier to put all of this together first before you go ahead and colour. And it's only the stems that are coloured, because the flowers themselves are white. So I need a 26 gauge wire. This is cut in half. You can use a 24 if you want, and you're going to use your Nile green Stemtex tape. Give that a good stretch again so all the glue is released. If you have trouble with your tape latching on, you could well find that you haven't pulled right to the end. So just extend the whole thing. Now this is fiddly. The first thing we want to do is take and level off all the loose seed head stamens that are going in on their own without blossoms on them. And then you can start to take a few of the blossoms, maybe 3 to start with. That's probably going to be enough to handle without everything falling apart. Try and keep things fairly level again. Okay, so we've got 3 blossoms in there and our 10 seed head stamens without blossoms on. Then I'm going to take my 26 gauge wire and just place that kind of in amongst, but I'm only going to allow myself about 1.5 centimeters at the bottom to tape, because I want to keep everything fairly long above it. So my stem length above where I'm going to tape is going to be roughly 3 centimeters, just over. Take your tape, and where the wire has been poked in, which is here, that's where I'm going to start my taping. It's a bit fiddly. If you can only handle the bundle of stamens and not the ones with blossoms on to start with, then do so. Now, my suggestion here would be to tape down that bundle first, come onto the stem by about 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, just so it's a little bit more robust and doesn't, when you pull the wire, doesn't come out. And now we can start to place, we can get that tape back on there. Again, we want to do this as neatly as possible. So if you can manage to put a number of these blossoms surrounding the center bit that you've just created without taping, so only tape now. I've got about 5 or 6 in there, so keep this bit from bulging too much. And it's also okay as long as they're going to be caught by the tape. It's all right if your tape is kind of starts to work its way down the wire, because we can always come back to neatening it off. So that's 3. Let's see if we can get another one in. 4. That seems to be as many as I want to handle. Give a twist of tape to get them on. Carry on. In. Just try and divide them fairly evenly around the center bit that you made. Once they're in, they're a lot less fragile because they're together. And then we're going to come with the tape up to where your initial line of taping is. Pinch really firm and then turn the angle of the tape so that you start to over tape and down the stem. And you probably won't need to go more than halfway down that length. Again, bring your finger and thumb here to try and narrow. Now, whilst they're all together, this is the only colouring you need to do on these. Go back to your lime shade, your moss green, lemon yellow mixed together, and catch the stems right up to the back of the flowers. But watch you don't catch them because you don't want them to flick off. Just really try and work that green colour. You can always, once you've flared them out a little bit, you can always come back and add a bit more colour. Now, having done that, we now need to bring these petals, these stems out. Now, remember they're on wires, so they're going to have a bit of a mind of their own. But think about umbrella spokes. Try not to pull them because we don't want them to come out of what you've just taped them into. But we need to give a little bit of volume. Or try and keep the ones that haven't got any petals inside the outer layer. Just keep working until you've got hold of all of them and you've managed to do this. Just separate and loosen them in the middle. The buds don't all have to be in the center, but they could be on the outside as well. I guess it doesn't really matter. And I just think, you know, when you make this, you think, well, I don't know if this is going to look right, but how fascinating. And if someone's looking at this and seeing what you've made, they'd never work it out. I think it's just so lovely as a filler, even though there's a bit of time involved in there. Definitely a labour of love. If you've done it on 33 gauge wires, so I've got one that's a 33, you can some of them, when you look at them in real life, they're actually curved like this. So once you've pulled them out, if you want to do that, just work your tweezers. So I'm just opening the tweezers slightly, position it at the bottom of the stem and close and tweak, move it up, close and tweak, just so it starts to curl. You don't have to do that to the center ones, just a few if you want. And if you're on 33 gauge wire, you're going to have no trouble at all doing this because they're much more rigid. Okay, so it probably needs a little bit more work, but that gives you an idea of what we're trying to achieve here. You might find it easier to do it with your fingers, I don't know. But just take the time because it really makes a difference. That one's a 33 gauge wire, so I can tell that that's actually going to hold its shape more. And that's your cow parsley. And if you want to, you can colour a little bit more at the back here. Now you can get to all the stems. Just taking care not to catch the blossoms because we don't want them to fall off. So I've opened that up a little bit more. You can see the shaping on the side, and from the top it's looking a lot more how I want it to now. So the Astrantia, we saw from the pictures online earlier that you can go from kind of white, greeny white, pale pinks, dark pink. I'm just going to do mine with green, a mix of fuchsia pink and plum, and then I'm going to add in a bit more detail using my alcohol. Okay, so and a fine brush. So I'm going to start off. Let's take my piece. Whoops. And I'm going to start off with the pink. It's important if you're working with different colours closely that you work with the main colour first. So I've got my pink. If I put green on first, then this will go brown. At least this is going to stay pink. So a little bit onto my brush, and then I'm going to very gently, avoiding the stamens, catch the tips of the petals. So I'm mixing my plum and fuchsia pink together to get a more natural colour. If you pick up a little bit onto the stamens, it doesn't matter. And when you're Googling images of Astrantia flowers, you can pick the shade that you really like and use that as your design, as your guide. So I'm just catching very gently again because they are fragile. Just watch out you don't catch the petals with your fingers or the brush too much, too harshly. Go all the way around. And straight away, it starts to look more realistic. So I've just got very subtle, very, very subtle pink shading on there. Now, I'm going to go a little bit on the back as well. Again, just coming in from the outside tip very gently because they're still a bit soft. And when they're dry, they're quite brittle. And then we'll go on to our lime green, which is the moss green lemon yellow. Catch the base. And if you're doing just white petals, then you could catch the tips with green instead of pink. That looks quite nice. Again, you want to find the variety that you really like that's going to match what you're making. So I've just got some green at the base there, just in there. And then from the top, very gently, I want to go right in. So almost, if I just use my stamens as my little kind of stop guide and just deepen this green shade in there. Again, be really careful because you just don't want the petals to snap now. But we're just working a little bit of colour in. If you've got a little camera lens puffer at this point, it'd be quite useful to give that a little puff so that the excess colours come off. So pink on the edge, green just inside and a little bit underneath. It's coming out a bit light on the camera, but there is a decent amount of colour on there. And then to finish it off, you've got a couple of things that you can do. One is the plum. Well, if I put a little bit of green and yellow mixed together as well in one of these trays. Just realised I haven't got any, sort that out in a minute, we'll just do the plum first. So take your brush and pick up some of the plum, just the plum on its own. This is what makes it look like an Astrantia. So just twist the brush so that you've got a good point. Support your fingers if your hands shake, and then just draw inward and catch the tips. It's almost like you're going to give it a burnt edge. It's just going to bring it to life. Don't forget to reload your brush because it will dry out after a few marks. I'm just drawing it inward. It's random. It doesn't have to be a specific line. We're just trying to catch the point. And then if you want to, you can actually draw, though it's not essential, you can draw a thin line. If I show you, there's a thin line of green that's been caught at the tips. I will show you how to do it. Actually, I just got to get hold of some of my green. I'm just cleaning off my brush as well because I don't want the pink. So I've got a little bit of my alcohol here, and I've got some green petal dust in my tray, which I can just grab hold of. Again, twist your brush to a point so that it becomes pointed at the tip. And here, I'm just going to catch. It's really difficult because we just want to catch a little green line, but it's got to be quite fine. If you remember, we put that central press in the petals, and now all I'm doing is brushing lines from about the middle of the petal out towards the tip. Again, it doesn't have to be neat, and it doesn't have to be every petal. I can bring this in a bit closer so you can see that I've got a line. So you can see it quite clearly there. There's a green line in there.